Good day. This is my review of Canticle for Leibowitz. First off, this is one of my highly recommended books. Very, very good book. It is a science fiction, or at least goes into the category of science fiction, although you're not going to find any spaceships. There are no aliens. It's more of a post-apocalyptic speculative fiction, which usually gets lumped in with science fiction. It's the basic premise of it is you have three different stories that all take place after what is implied basically is a nuclear war or something has happened where civilization has all fallen apart and all of the old learning is gone. And if immediately what you need to do is when you're reading this is keep in mind that it is written as a way of paralleling the fall of Rome. And actually, let me go back and let me explain part of the backstory to this was it was written by a man whose name I cannot remember, but I could look it up, but I don't want to. And he was a bomber, if I remember right, in World War II, who was participating in the campaign through Italy in 1944, 43, 45. Actually, well, 45, they weren't in Italy anymore, if I remember it. And if you don't know, there's a monastery there called Monte Cassino, which is the monastery that was started by Saint Benedict of Nursia. Now, it's not the original one because that one was actually destroyed. And so the monastery there has been a monastery there for 1,500 years or so. But I know it was destroyed when Frederick II came in and destroyed that during the time of Thomas Aquinas. And if I remember right, there might be another time when it was destroyed. I can't remember. But so it's not the original one. But so what happened was the Americans were certain that monastery, because it was on top of a hill, was being used as a lookout point for the Nazis, that the Nazis were camped out in that monastery and that they were using it to survey all of the land. And so the strategy, they ended up coming with part of the strategy was to let's bomb that monastery. And the American bombers destroyed it. And it turns out there were no Nazis in there. There were no German soldiers. And that, and the author, whose name I can't remember, I will look it up real fast, Canticle, Walter M. Miller. That's right. So Walter M. Miller. So we'll call him Walter Miller. So Walter Miller, he felt really just torn inside about that, because he saw here is this building older than the United States, older than, obviously anybody there, older than the history of the country of Italy, at least as far as a unified country. And he just destroyed it with one bomb. And he realized he just had this big picture of how quickly civilization can just be destroyed. And then he was thinking about how those were the very monks that had preserved tradition and civilization. It was the monks, particularly the Irish monks, but just kind of a side note that it was the Irish monks that particularly brought about that idea of let's copy these classic works. And the Benedictines eventually did it too. So in Europe, I should say. So by the way, side note, if you ever want to read a book about that, I recommend How the Irish Saved Civilization. And so he contemplated that. He said, well, in the future, if this same thing were to happen, if the world civilization ends up being just collapsing, will it be the monks again who preserve civilization, who bring it back about? And that's what the book is about monks. And that's at least one of the stories, the first two stories, well, all three stories involve monks. And that's the basic premise, but it ends up being a very deep and powerful story. And then, of course, about who gets the credit for it and how eventually, as usually happens, most people don't realize now how important monks in the church was in creating the modern education system, for good or for bad, for how it is now. But that the universities were started by the Catholic Church, and that all of the reason we know so much about the history of the world and philosophy and logic and thought and math and science is because of the existence of the church. If you take the church out of the history of the world, we would almost certainly be much less advanced in learning and technology. But most people don't know that. And that actually ends up becoming kind of the part of the plot in Canticle for Leibowitz. So that's really all I'm going to say about it. It's not for kids, partially because it's just they won't get it. It's definitely a high school book, and it does explore, particularly in the third section, some dark themes, particularly about euthanasia and suicide, basically electing to be suicide by a doctor. So, and it's not necessarily a happy book, but I do highly recommend it for high schoolers. And I don't remember there being really anything salacious. I don't remember any language. I'm not saying there isn't, I just don't remember any. And because I read it a couple of years ago. So, but that would be it. So highly recommend it. Canticle for Leibowitz, and I hope you enjoy.